welcome to the Nirvana Strength Practitioners Panel Podcast, where we explore the idea of human performance optimization. I'm Ian McLeod, the co-founder of Nirvana Strength, and on today's episode, we'll be joined by Marie Belle. Hi, Marie.
Hola.
She is a psychologist in social emotional development, has a Ph.D. That's pretty legit, much more than mine, just master's degree. She also has a graduate certificate in women's studies, which that's really cool, and I definitely want to ask you about that. And then we go into maybe more of your current life with regards to your studies in Reiki and different yoga practices. And so we'll get a feeling of where Marie is now in her life, but also go back into her life experiences and how it kind of led up to where she is now. So I'm pretty excited about this conversation. Before we start, just to give a quick props to the Haven Suites Bali Bara Hotel. This is where we generally do most of our podcasts, and they have an amazing facility, and the hotel is beautiful right next to the beach, and they promise to help make your holiday in Bali epic, which is something.
Amazing.
Yeah,
really
it is quite nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so to get started, if you could maybe give a really quick bio of yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Marie Belle, Marie Belle, and I am currently living in DC. I teach and practice yoga full-time. I've been trained in many different disciplines. I consider myself more of an anthropologist of movement, anthropologist of yoga, more so than a disciple of any tradition. And with that, I practice Ashtanga. I'm trained in Dharma and Rocket, Hot Yoga, Vinyasa, a little bit of everything, Anusara, Tantra. I'm just really interested in different perspectives of truth and how to express a little bit more freely, whether in physical form, in intellectual form, verbal form, however it works.
I like that how you started off with the anthropologist of movement.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I don't know if I've heard anyone say it like that before.
I've
But
never
that's
said
quite
it like that
interesting.
before.
No,
yeah,
well,
I
that's
just
cool.
randomly said it.
Yeah. No, that's a very cool way to think about it. This idea of even this idea of human, optimization. Like how do we physically, mentally, spiritually, as humans, as an animal, right? Like how do we maximize our own selves?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, it'd be quite interesting to hear how your take on it and how you've progressed in your life and how have you gone through the process of, you started out, definitely a very interesting thing and a very interesting mix, I think, is your yoga practice, you're a high level consumer of meat. You have a Ph.D., which is, having that kind of combination and everything else that you do, it's quite amazing. Like everything that you're doing right now.
Yeah.
How did you go from I guess having a PhD, doing research, and into now, I guess I would say maybe you have a little bit more free time and doing maybe something that you actually maybe you like more than what you did before.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with the psychology piece. I was in Virginia Tech, and that's where I obtained my PhD in psychology. And in the process of that, I was research. I was interested in emotions and culture and how our culture trains us to think about, talk about, and express emotions, and how that affects our beliefs and our identity. And then gradually in the process, in 2007, in Virginia Tech, there were some shootings, like mass shootings.
Right.
This person killed 32 people, and then he killed himself, and I was in the building on lockdown. And once that happened, I stopped speaking. I went through my own process, and my mentor at the time told me that I needed to talk to someone. But I'm in psychology department, so I didn't want to talk to anyone in the psychology department. And fast forward, there was a lot of stuff going on, and there was this mindful meditation.
Okay.
And she told me I could do that one because then I don't have to talk to anyone and I don't have to make eye contact. And I went. I wasn't really excited about it. It was a 12-week program. And on week 6, I started speaking again. And on week 6 was mindful movement. And that's when we were to stand up barefooted and just feel what the earth felt like and what part of our foot touches the ground. Is it the heel? Is it the ball mound? Is it the toe? what the temperature of the grass is, how is it wet, is it old, is it new, and then from there, the mentor said I should do yoga. And then I started going to gym yoga and whatnot, because at the time I was training to bike across the country, and my body just physically needed to stretch, and I just liked being alone and doing things on my own. So that was how it started. And then gradually, I fell in love with one of the teachers. She was awesome. Right away I knew like she was going to be my best friend. And so I would go to all of her classes, and then another teacher subbed one of her classes.
Okay.
And I fell in love with her. And so all of a sudden I was practicing yoga all the time. And they invited me to do a teacher training 1 week in a month for 9 months. And I just did it mostly to learn philosophy, anatomy, how to practice on my own. And then from there, everything just started picking up in the yoga world. And in psychology, I was still working on my Ph.D. I first started studying mothers and their children for my master's. For my Ph.D., I took out the children because I didn't really want to study women in dyads anymore.
Okay.
And then now, when you ask me the question, I was like, whoa. Now I'm just studying myself. Like, just looking at myself and optimizing and getting to know myself a little bit more.
I mean, that's definitely, I think, the last part, right, where now you're studying yourself. I think, it's something that a lot of people are missing in their lives, even reflecting on their own, like, even how do they actually truly feel about their lives and their situations and what they're actually doing. They're kind of like at least in the States, right, particularly in big cities, where you're just caught up in this rat race and you just kind of go from situation to situation to situation, and you never even have an opportunity to even think about what happened. And is there anything in particular that you're focused on within yourself now, or is it just the overall self-exploration?
A lot of self-exploration by exploring like the fringes, whether that's like extreme, just different practices of yoga for sure, and then different belief systems. I'm very interested in relative truth and absolute truth. But within myself, I just kind of go with the flow. So whatever's in front of me, that's what I'm going to learn. I'm very, very interested in learning different ways of optimizing development.
So it's a relatively like loose structure. Like you're not like, 2 weeks I'm going to study this one thing, and then like another 2 weeks I'm going to study this other thing. It's whatever kind of comes up at the time.
Yeah, it's very organic, and there's a very clear structure. So I'm still always doing physical movement. I'm always doing breath work. I'm always doing meditation. I'm always reading. It's just that sometimes the themes are a little bit different. Sometimes I'm working more straight lines, dogma, indoctrination, and other times it's much more like fluid and organic and mobility versus strength and
Sure. Okay. No, that's very cool. So in your development over your physical practice, how has it changed since when you first started taking your yoga classes? Did you do something before yoga?
Yeah, I did a lot of ball sports. So in like high school, I did volleyball, basketball, softball, soccer. I did all the team sports. And then when I went to college at NC State, I was on the snowboarding team, and I was on there was some other team I did. And then I went to Virginia Tech, and I was on the boxing team for half a season, and then I just kind of dropped out. Okay. But gradually I went from team stuff to more individualized work on my own. I started with yoga in 2007. Yeah. And from there I started with Ashtanga. At the time I didn't know there were different disciplines, there were different styles. And gradually as I started learning one, I would meet people I really admired in others. So then that's what I would learn.
I think that kind of makes sense to make that gradual change for most people, just because there's not really too many like team leagues or the structure of being able to even play a team sport as an adult, and the ability to be able to do a solo sport, like let's say yoga or calisthenics or whatever, is that you have the ability to connect and actually meet people from so many different backgrounds all over the world.
Yeah, no, I always loved to train. I've always been very athletic, very physical. And I think that's why I really resonated with Ashtanga. It's a lot of Sun salutations, a lot of strength, a lot of flexibility, and a lot of just like being on my own. And I could see potential developing more and more. And so there was a moving target constantly where I was like, I want to be able to do this. And then after a few months, I could do it. So it was like, okay, I'm not aiming far enough. And I've always really appreciated that about the practice.
Are there any specific things that you incorporate from your PhD studies into your practice, like your movement practice or the way you instruct?
Critical thinking, for sure. And we were talking about this at the gym the other day or yesterday, how you want to train people to be independent. That's kind of how I am too, in my own practice, and then also in the way I teach. I'm very interested in the how, not necessarily the what. It's more like, this is how you would do it. And then once you have that, then certain doors unlock and you're able to play a little bit more.
Right.
So basically getting the foundations really well, and then from there expanding a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely, through all the like educational avenues that I've taken, whether it be like university or certs or whatnot, I would say the ones that kind of stuck with me the most are not necessarily like the ones that taught me like, all right, like this is A through Z and you got to follow these steps and you got to do everything just like this so that you get this result. The issue that I had with like a lot of those, like when it's so rigid of a structure like that, is that it doesn't allow for critical thinking. It doesn't allow for unforeseen situations or, because like if you were, there's, a lot of like TV shows of like doctors performing surgery and they're like, oh my God, there's like this really, unexpected complication. Is like, well, the complication is just something that you, maybe the system that you studied under didn't actually thought may have been possible, or didn't allow for, something to happen that well, what's a better way of explaining this?
Multidisciplinary, for sure. So the original question with the PhD stuff is, as I was obtaining my PhD, I saw a few pockets that were just like uninformed or unresearched. And so I went into women's studies, I went into the sociology department, I went into the biology department, and I was very much encouraged to be multidisciplinary. And so I took that within the yoga field as well, where I was like, in no way am I trying to be a disciple. In no way am I trying to regurgitate any form of information. I'm trying to understand the tools and why they work for me, and then critically think and integrate everything I'm learning or everything I'm experiencing. And so therefore it's constantly evolving. It doesn't stay still. And
I think that's really important, especially when it comes to, and I've had these kind of conversation with a few people with regards to like becoming like a system coach or a system trainer or a system whatever, is that you're only going to be very limited to the ability to instruct or teach or mentor people who would be a good fit for that system. You actually kind of like, you end up neglecting like a large portion of the population because they just don't fit what you do, which is perfectly reasonable if you're happy with that. There's definitely plenty of successful coaches that are able to really identify like the premier athletes that would fit their system perfectly, and then somehow recruit them to instruct them. But I do find that it's much more impressive of a feat to be able to accomplish the same level of goals with no matter who you have as a student, and who you interact with. So I think that ability to adapt from situation to situation is quite impressive.
No, and I've been experiencing that. I just started living in DC again recently, and I picked up a Mysore room, which is basically open gym. People show up at whatever time, and they just move through their practice at their own time. And I get to watch people practice and see their patterns, and also I get to think for myself, this pose doesn't necessarily work for this person, or this way of doing things isn't the best. And so I offer them ways to think about the purpose of what they're doing, more so than what it should look like. So I'm much more interested in why and the how. And often students who come from a more indoctrinated place are asking me if they're doing it right or wrong. And I'm not really interested in right and wrong. I'm no longer in the dualist world. I'm more interested in the what works for you, how does it feel, and like you were saying, I don't need them to fit a particular form. There are particular coordinates that need to be met in regards to foundation and structure, but not in regards to progressing or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I do find it, so we have kind of a mentor or coach that we speak with regards to Olympic weightlifting, and he's a former national team athlete from China, and he's the current Singapore national team coach. His name is Wu Chuanfu. But he was telling us about how, like, even in China, where there's pretty much all the athletes at a very young age have a solid foundation of doing gymnastics strength training or gymnastics in general, right, to build up joint mobility and strength, and then they get separated into their disciplines. And then within their disciplines, then they learn the foundations of like those disciplines. But then eventually, once they get to like incredibly like high levels, so they're preparing for the Olympics, let's say, that like there's specifics that to what they do, like their specific technique that is very specific to that person. So whether or not like maybe their femur is a little bit longer than someone else's, or their lats only engage a certain percentage of compared to other, like, so this is very specific to each individual at much higher levels. But yeah, there is a basic foundation that I think that is important for everybody to know.
No, that's how the practice is for me too. Like what I actually do, the majority of people stay within one series, and then gradually you become much more specific.
Yeah.
And for me, the more specific I got in my body with this practice, the more injury I got. And so that's how I started then returning to a little bit more holistic approach. And I started weightlifting or rock climbing or hiking and dancing and returning to the rest of my life versus being very, very specific.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of good to learn from someone who's gotten so specific, but I don't want to stay there.
This, I kind of think it brings me to, I went to this cacao farm, and this is like totally random, but it kind of fits in this idea of like not specializing or not being too specific, and how it kind of creates weaknesses in the bodies, right? Is that so I went to this cacao farm here in Bali, and I was shown like a really good cacao farm versus like a not so good cacao farm, and one of the biggest and kind of most important aspect of it was that the farm that was not very good was the farm that was basically being monocropped. Was like there was only cacao plants, and the ones that were actually really good and produced the high levels of beans were the ones that were like, there was like, for like every 3 cacao trees there would be like a coconut tree, and then there would be like a melon tree, and there would be like other, like, though it was specifically a cacao farm, that they had like small trees of other fruits. Yeah. Which I don't think it would actually maybe it has no relationship, but I thought that's kind of relationship. Yeah. I think I just thought of that right now. That was kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot more evolution to be had when you alternate a little bit.
So are you familiar with the term kind of used nowadays, generalists? Right. Yes. So I think for some people they kind of take it a little bit too extreme, where they become so much of a generalist in everything. But I would almost think that maybe we would want to do something like like the really nice cacao farm that I was just kind of talking about, where maybe we have a very specific thing that we focus on, but we incorporate all these different disciplines.
Yeah, I like that approach. I remember when I first started, I had that same perspective. And one of my teachers said that when you dig a well, you don't want to dig a bunch of little holes. You want to go to one and just keep digging. And another phrase that was used is, you don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. And I remember when I heard that, it was just like, I could be a master of several. And I really like Bruce Lee. I've been listening to your podcast. I was like, it's just learning, going to the ones for me, seeing people who move a particular way and really appreciating that, and going to the masters within that. So for me, it's been within Ashtanga, and then other fields of movement. But as a whole, I like going to the specialists. Every person, for me at least, when I look at hand balancing, that's another one. When I look at hand balancers, some of them also practice ballet, or they also do weightlifting or hanging or rock climbing. They incorporate other things to make sure to be properly balanced. And that's what I noticed every time I would practice with a specialist, is that they actually specialize in several things, not just one. But I agree that I'm not a generalist in the sense that I'm going to do every single thing, but I would like to have transferable skills, which is why I liked your gym, and I was mentioning that to you with the gymnastics strength training stuff. No, but for real, it's just like, whoa, it's nice to see how my skill set transfers over. At the same time, it's nice to see all the things I could work on that are legit, pretty cool skill sets to have. Whether for me it's pulling or anything body weight fascinates me. So yeah.
No, it's I think the body weight thing, although a lot of people kind of consider it a newer age like trend, with all the bar stars and calisthenics and competitions kind of stuff. I mean, it's one of the oldest training styles about there. I mean, there's not always been like a bench press and all these weights that we use nowadays. Like in the old days of the like Spartans and Greeks, like they picked up stones and they used whatever odd objects they would have around them. They used a lot of body weight exercises, and so I think nowadays too, you find people who are very quick to start doing, like maybe 2 times body weight on a back squat when they don't even have the basic mechanics to perform, let's say a single leg squat. And so I think performing a lot of like isometric work or unilateral work, single leg work, single arm exercises, as well as like it helps people better identify like where their weaknesses are, and then they can start making some real improvements on them. But definitely it's been great to have someone like yourself who comes from a different training style as well, because with the kind of open educational environment that we have, like it's not that what we do is like the perfect system. We try to continuously try to make improvements on what we're doing based off of whatever information we can get and how we can just continue the growth process. Because I think particularly with like the growth of the human body, like it's hard to say, especially now, like this is it, like this is the best it's going to be, who knows where it's going to go.
No, for me, that's what I like about the practice or just moving in general, is like there is no end goal. Maybe there's some short-term goals, like I would like to be able to do this with my body or this with my life, but as a whole, that similar to what I was saying earlier, is just like that target's constantly moving, and it's like, whoa, this could go in so many areas, so many different directions.
Do you ever find that daunting, like that idea that it just never, like where's the end? Like
No,
it just
I love it. It makes me really, really happy, and it's why I travel. I get to explore all of that. So for me, it's fascinating. I'm very fascinated by all of it. So. Do you find it daunting?
I think as long as I keep the goals that I want in perspective, like in the right perspective, I think it's important. So like, let's say, if I'm doing bench press or something that requires a lot of weight, not necessarily like calisthenics based, but at what point is it enough like strength, right? If I already bench press like 100 kgs or 150 kilos, like is it really important to me to bench press like 160, but there is at times that it can be kind of daunting, I think. But I think part of that too is like I kind of get myself out of it by even sometimes changing the training style or methodology that I use. I think sometimes if you just, some people are okay to just do the same thing over and over again for the rest of their life. I can do it for times of, let's say 3 months or 6 months or whatever. But I think in my own personal practice, I do have a very loose structure in what I do. There's some things that I kind of almost do every day. Like I always do like just a little bit of handstands. Like even if it's just 5 minutes, but I kind of just generally like just maybe I'll start off with like a body scan, right, and just kind of figure out what areas that I'm tight or what do I feel like training for the day. Obviously within a loose structure of knowing that even if I felt like training handstands, if I've done it like 5 days in a row, I probably should do something else, just so that I can get a more broader spectrum of conditioning with the body. But yeah, for me, my biggest focus is on my flexibility, because as a big guy and coming from American football. I always have to say American football because we're not in America, and most people don't know. If I say football, they think of soccer, or I don't know, something else. Mostly soccer, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's quite important for me right now to work on that flexibility component, because I was always like not flexible, like just super strong but zero flexibility, which yeah, it's not as big of an issue now, but definitely not as flexible as you.
Yeah, well, I've purposefully worked on it. And Bruce Lee, too, he would do, I think it was like 70% flexibility, 30% strength. Something like that was what he would constantly, like, he would talk about in his training programs. And so I was like, I'm going to spend a lot more time on flexibility.
Yeah.
Because then I have more access to the rest of myself.
Yeah.
So I don't have to be so heavy.
Yeah, definitely feeling heavy is not a good thing. Yeah. Especially I was like doing this freediving course the other day, and you know, if you're a big dude, like, you don't really float very well. So it makes it a little bit of a struggle. Yeah, being out there and just like, I think I describe myself as a rhino in water, and so it was quite funny because there was just a couple other like females out there who were just like not even trying. They would just like float, you know, and I just felt like I was quite a struggle, but I do appreciate the process. Like, I think when I first started like snowboarding, like the first week I did it, like it was just bruises like everywhere. I felt like maybe a couple times I almost like broke my wrists because well, in Korea when we snowboard, there's like it's all man-made, so it's like the snow is just horrible. But yeah, and the process is really good. I try to focus more on that than the actual like end goal. Yeah.
No, but the original piece in regards to is it daunting, I remember talking to one of my friends about it. The further I got along in my practice, the more I started questioning like the point of it, like how many more different ways do I need to like bring my foot behind my head, or why do I even need to contort? Is there like a life purpose in it? And he's a hand balancer and he does one-arm handstand stuff, and he was like, fuck yeah, there's a reason. Like, this door is opening up for 0.5% of the human population, and it's opening up for me. I'm going to go through it. And then from there on out, I was like, yeah. So for me, it's not daunting. It's like really inspiring and creative.
I think part of the process is, you know, there's a certain amount of abilities that each individual that we're born with, right? From just a DNA perspective and like even anatomical perspective. That if you actually, some people have the anatomy that would allow you to be better at contortionism, or that would allow you to be better at, let's say, someone like Usain Bolt, right? Like, he's just built to be a sprinter. But obviously he maximizes his ability in that capacity, right? So I think part of the exploration process is to kind of figure out what areas can we maybe focus our specialization, and then once we find it, to maximize that potential.
It's like seeing what you're naturally good at, what you love to train, and finding people who love to do it and are better than you. For me, at least, that's been the whole process of not just training, but travel too, and research and all of that.
Yeah. So are you interested in going back to your former life at all? Like with the research and Ph.D. work and...
At times I am. When I returned to DC and I signed a lease in January, it was a given I was going to return to university life in fall. And so I would return to teaching university students. I very much love teaching 18 to 24-year-olds. I know it's a prime time for identity development and developing their own voice. And at GW, George Washington University, the students are brilliant. And so for me, it was very inspiring to be around scholars and intellectuals. Right now, I'm around a lot of intellectuals as well within DC, but like within the movement world, it's a different field. But at the same time, when the opportunity came up for August, I'm here instead for 2 weeks. And so I keep having the opportunity and the idea to return to university life and be a professor in the mornings and in the evenings teach yoga. But I travel so much now that I prefer to travel on my own terms. And but there are common common grounds. Like, I only teach people who want to be there. In the university, when I taught for 10 years, I never took attendance. And I let people know on day one that I'm not taking attendance. If you don't want to be here, don't show up.
Yeah.
And I'm the same with any class I teach. It's just like, I don't care who shows up. I'm just going to teach. I'm here. And so in that regards, I'm only interested in people who want to engage and want to grow and want to be active in their process. And then within the psychology piece, I created my own school. So I have a yoga teacher training school, and so again, I only teach people who want to be there.
Yeah.
I create a curriculum. I teach philosophy, anatomy, physical practice, breath work, meditation. So I'm still intellectually stimulated.
Right.
And I'm very much into empowering others and myself through dialogue and creating spaces to talk about things that matter, creating spaces to move through things that are important.
Yeah.
And so in a way, I'm doing it on my own without necessarily being in an institution.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I mean, the idea of, I think as instructors as well, or as coaches or mentors or whatnot, is that I think most people would prefer someone who is actively engaged in their own development, right? I think there's a lot of people who they believe that they are active there, that they are genuinely interested because they pay for a certification program and then they go to the certification program, but actually they're not really engaged at all. They're just kind of like, they've almost created a situation that forces them to be there like on a mandatory basis, and they kind of just check out, right? And they almost in that scenario, they kind of just want to have their hands held and just like taken through the whole process the whole time.
Yeah.
I think even in those scenarios, where even if you do, let's say, have a paying customer who is wanting to learn something, I still wouldn't, I wouldn't have attendance, or, obviously there would be some scenarios where maybe you would need to, like, let's say for maybe a yoga certification, you need to actually be present to be able to pass it, but you wouldn't, be calling them at 6 a.m. and be like, hey, where are you? You coming to class?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Like, you would actually just, if they attended, then they attended, right? I think that's really important.
Yeah, they just won't receive a certificate if they don't show up.
Yeah.
And they can make up the time on their own. And so I refuse to sign anyone's certificate if they haven't fulfilled all the hours.
Right.
With that being said, if they miss a weekend, they missed a weekend. It's up to them to schedule it with me. It's up to them. I'm not going to call them and tell them exactly what they need to do. They already know. So I'm not holding their hand. But I have had plenty of students who sign up for the teacher training, go to weekend 1, and then miss the rest of the time. And it becomes this like 4 or 5 year process of learning. And again, I'll be there and I'm doing my work. But if they don't show up, they're not getting the certificate. But I'm not in a bad mood with them. I don't judge them for it. I'm not angry with them. And sometimes when they write to me, they think I'm going to be upset with them in some way. And it's like, no, you can just go to the one in Puerto Rico. Yeah. These are the dates. Yeah. So.
No, and I think, I think as educators, it's good to have, or to take away like any emotional responses to. Because obviously, you never really know like what exactly like people are going through in their own lives. But even understanding the basic idea of like not getting overly emotional about a situation or something that you can't actually control, or maybe has no real bearing on your own life. Like, why would you want to cause stress for yourself because some student that you barely even know doesn't show up to a class that they paid for? I don't know. Like, it seems like it could be stressful if you were worried about it.
Yeah, I have a refund policy too. So now that I have that, it's just like I refer them to that. It's like, you can make it up, but so I'm not too worried about it. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. So how is your school going now?
I created a school. It's called Roots Love Yoga. It's going really amazing. I just completed a teacher training in DC and in Puerto Rico. Okay. So it's 1 weekend a month for 6 months, 9 months, depends on where I'm doing it. Oh, wow, okay. Yeah, the Puerto Rico crew just graduated 2 weeks ago, and the DC crew graduated probably a month ago. And I have another one going starting in October in DC. And then in Richmond, Virginia, I'll have a 300-hour, so it's a little bit higher level. Yeah. and much more.
Are there, like in Bali, like most of the courses here tend to just be like 1 month, just intensive, like get smashed, and it's like, it seems to me like it's like a lot of material in such a short period of time.
Yeah, so there's different ways to look at it. My first one was 1 weekend a month for 9 months, and that was amazing because each weekend we learned, so the practice that I do, we do sun salutations, standing, seated, and closing. On weekend 1, we learned sun salutations, go home, practice. So that's maybe 10 minutes. And so gradually we were building a practice.
Yeah.
On weekend 2, it was sun salutations, standing, go home, practice. And then it went on like that. And so that's very much how I teach. And it became a part of my life when I did it 1 weekend a month for 9 months. And at the time I was in academia, so that academic calendar works for me. With that being said, there was also a summer program in hot yoga for a summer, a month. And that had its pluses and its minuses. Its pluses was a lot of school teachers or people who can't take off work all the time.
Yeah.
They can take off 1 month. Teachers, basically. And graduate students could do it. And it's a crash course for sure. And at the time I had already done my 1 weekend a month for 9 months. So the month was perfect.
Yeah.
But I do know that it's a little bit more difficult to integrate it, and it becomes something you did for a month in Bali or a month wherever, and then when you come home you're in a completely different vibe and a completely different schedule, so it's difficult to maintain a practice and to then go through the process. With me, I was able to see what the practice did for me. So I think of it more like medicine and pharmaceuticals. So gradually, like each posture is like a pill, and I get to see what it does for me. And it's like, whoa, my nervous system is jacked. I'm not going to continue adding more things. Yeah. Whereas if it's for a month, it's just like, I don't care if your nervous system is jacked, you just keep going. Yeah. So there are pluses and minuses. I don't do month-long. It's not true. I'm about to do a month-long for the... and some people love it because some people just really love to train hard. And then they go home and they're not interested in being teachers per se. They just wanted to train really hard for a month. Yeah, so I've named those intensives more so than teacher trainings. So it's just like you dive in and we're reading all the time and practicing.
I think the idea of like teacher trainings too, there's a lot of certification programs out there for whatever it is you really want to do beyond, yoga. You get your TRX and your kettlebells and all that stuff. But I do feel like there's a massive gap in the actual like practical component part of all these certs, right? Where it's just, I don't know if it happens in the intensive as much, but it sounds like maybe it was. I would say I would almost maybe prefer the 1 weekend a month, because it seems like you would have enough time to, in whatever free time you did have, to actually like take in the material that you learn and you can apply it and you can practice the things that you learned, as opposed to just be constantly like adding more and more and more things, and then maybe after a month then you have to somehow like go back and try to go through the entire process, or but I like that idea that you can actually take what was given to you and then apply it to your own practice, because I think people kind of also or they don't fully understand that just because you completed a course, or that you know the exercise and like the tips and cues, that it qualifies you to actually instruct the material. It's hard to ask a surgeon who's only studied in a book, right, to perform surgery if they've never actually done any practical components. Obviously that's a little bit more complicated than doing being a personal trainer, but I guess there's a lot of similarities, right? Like the actual experience part of it is super important.
Yeah, but that's also like different allegiances or alliances have developed to make sure there's a bare minimum of what needs to happen in order for someone to be able to teach. And so there are a number of hours that people have to teach in order to be considered able to teach. And so I observe people teaching 20 hours. They have to practice 80 plus hours. But yeah, the month-longs for me, the people I accept are people who are already practicing with me. I don't accept newbies. If someone's like brand new to yoga and they want to do a yoga teacher training, which I have had, apply, but I'm not really there. I don't want to teach. I prefer if it's a teacher training for it to be someone who's been practicing with me for a year or two.
Do you feel like if it was someone who's just a complete beginner, that there's just is too big of a gap in understanding of the material, or is it harder to get them caught up?
Yes, and it's kind of a weird phenomenon to say I'm going to teach this, but I've never practiced it. This is really a weird concept for me, and so I prefer to teach someone who's in love with it. Again, I only work with people who like really want to be there and are in love with it. I have had people, I refunded this one person her money before it even started.
Yeah.
She was doing it as her therapy because her therapist said she should do yoga, and her therapist said she should do all this energetic stuff, which I offer. And I was like, this is not in replacement to therapy. Maybe you should use this money towards therapy instead. So I do see some people doing it instead of, it's a personal development, not therapy.
So if we get a basic, what would be in general, a basic breakdown of like a 200-hour cert?
Like a curriculum?
Yeah, so it's you said 80 hours of it is practice?
Yeah, so the numbers I won't get correct, but there are 5 categories that need to be fulfilled.
Okay.
Physical anatomy,
right.
Practice, teaching practicum, philosophy, and lifestyle, which is basically electives. So depending on the crew I'm teaching, some of my stronger people, they wanted more hand balancing, handstands, strength training. Another crew was more interested in meditation, breath work, energetic anatomy. So there are a certain number of hours that must be fulfilled in order for someone to teach. With that being said, there is no, there's no audit. So a lot of people get away with a lot of things that are technically not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But so there is an alliance, Yoga Alliance, that has created the bare minimum standards.
So the practice component, though, it'd be hard to have 80 hours of pure class time, right? Like how would you monitor someone's 80 hours of practice hours?
With
they just
me,
have to be
practice
present.
With me.
They practice with you.
Yeah, so in DC, because I live there, I teach Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. No, 6:30 to 9 a.m. And they just show up. And so you have to show up 3 times a week for the next 6 weeks, or for the next 6 months. And the math may be off, but I usually overestimate. So if it's a 200-hour teacher training, I train them for 220 or for 250.
Yeah.
But they have to practice with me. And the same thing in Puerto Rico. So that one took a little bit longer. They would practice with me or my co-teacher. And they just go to the gym or they go to the studio, and it has to be with me.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah, and that's the other piece. It's quality control for me. I don't want someone saying I taught them and they did a teacher training with me and I've never, their practice. Okay, back up. When I first started, my very first teacher training was in Virginia Tech. At that point, I had big dreams to move to California. And as the teacher training continued, I started finding out a little bit more politics of who's who in the Ashtanga world, or who's who of the world. And I realized that no one knew who my teacher was. And there were these big dogs in Ashtanga, making sure no one would consider themselves an Ashtanga teacher. And so I asked him, I said, when I moved to California, no one knows you. Am I going to be able to find a job? And he said, if anyone ever questions your ability to teach, you tell them to watch you practice. And that's it. And so from there is where I was just like, oh, my practice speaks for itself. And it's not just my physical practice, it's my philosophy or my ability to write or express myself or the way I move through things. I realized was up to me, and that's what would sell it, So fast forward to what we were just speaking of, is practice is really important. And if someone's practice isn't on track, they're not going to get a certificate. And I don't mean by performance, I mean by attendance. There's some phenomenal teachers who physically don't do that much, and there's some crappy teachers who do a lot of physical, beautiful things. But
yeah, I think it's, but also too, I mean, this is one kind of problem we kind of see in sports, or strength and conditioning and different sports arenas with regards to trainers is, there's a lot of athletes that don't necessarily make the best of coaches, and also a coach doesn't necessarily have to have all the physical components of an athlete to be able to be a good coach as well. Is there any, like, if I were to go to any, I don't know, random city or whatnot, like what are some specifics of, like, as a student looking for a good instructor, like within the yoga realm, like what would I be looking for? Because if there's just generally it's just like a wide range of classes and instructors, and
I think it's highly individualized. It depends on what you value.
Yeah.
So for me, I very much value someone who's actually practicing. So they're still practicing to this day, and they have moved through their own process. I'm also intellectual, so I like people who recommend books to me or have actually written books. And I've resonated with particular philosophy teachers who are like, whoa, this person gets it. And when I read what they're writing, it was my experience in words. And I just hadn't put words to it. So for me, it's also that, and then just like resonating with someone the minute I walk in and a teacher just like sparks me. That happened to me with one of the schools I did. I walked in and immediately I liked her. I liked her vibe. I liked what she was about, and whatever she was doing, I wanted to do. It was just a given. Okay. So for me, as I was inspired right away to just be better. And that's just mine. In general, I would say just go to the classes and see which one resonates with you and go from there, because each teacher is different. It's not just the discipline. At first, I would say go to this one discipline, but I no longer recommend a particular discipline. No. I just recommend that you find something that speaks to you that you can do every day, or you look forward to doing.
Cool. Yeah. So what is something that you're looking forward to doing now? What's your main focus on your movement practice?
I'm very open. The other 2 weeks ago, I was in DC, and now I'm more open to this world of like body weight stuff. So like planches are kind of cool. And so I took a workshop, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, okay, there's a possibility. Yeah. This is something I could train.
That'd be pretty sweet if you can do a planche.
Yeah, I'll show you a video at Nirvana that I just did, and it's just like, it's a crappy planche, but it's just kind of like, okay, I'm moving towards that direction, which is cool. Within bodyweight stuff, the muscle ups, when I took your class for the first time, the fundamentals class, and you taught muscle up stuff, I was like, I've never worked with rings. I don't do pull-ups. I don't do dips. And my first fundamentals class was muscle up. So that, I realized it was really, really difficult and a possibility. So anything.
Yeah. I mean,
so now muscle ups, planches.
It's actually, considering like you were saying, like how you just never do anything with pull-ups, it's, but I think most people who train for performance, whatever realm it might be, they're always going to have some level of physical performance that translates over to other arenas. But yeah, you could definitely do it if you're strong.
Yeah, it was, strong. And that's what I mean. It's just like being exposed to this world of stuff I never knew about, and now taking a workshop or a class and being like, oh, this is trainable. This is something that I could technically train in my body. So within that, planche and muscle ups, but within the yoga world, I really want to, like within the Ashtanga world, I want to get into fourth series. Like there's certain there's different series that I'd like to achieve for no reason. For no reason
What's
other
the
than
highest series?
6. Well, 7th is when you have children, and so at that point you graduate. So some people go straight to 7th series. No, for real. Okay. It's, yeah. But I remember when I first started, I just wanted to be able to sit with myself. I just wanted to be okay with who I was. And then gradually a lot of things were impossible for me. And then after 6 months, I realized that my mind was limiting me. My body can physically do most things if I just train it. And so that's why I really like this practice. Again, the moving target is just constantly adding stuff.
Is there a lot of politics in yoga realm?
I think there's a lot of politics with any human groups. Yeah. And so, there's a lot of that, a lot of boundaries and systems and authorities and people holding on to their lifeline. And, I've had a few politics stuff. Like, within the Ashtanga world, if I chose to be authorized from India, I wouldn't be able to have a teacher training because only he can teach teachers. And at that point, I started backing off. It was like, I don't want someone in a different continent to tell me what I can do with my livelihood.
Right. Wait, but why wouldn't you be able to teach?
Because he's the heartbeat of the practice, is kind of how it's portrayed, or it's a tradition. It's
only one individual?
Is the idea that some of them are trying to hold, but that's not my direct experience, and that's not necessarily something I need to uphold.
Yeah.
So that I've had a few instances where people get upset about what I do and how I do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do find it quite interesting, the idea that like we almost like became an affiliate of a gymnastics program company, and you know we're based here in Bali and they're based in America, and basically the contract that we were given was like full basic, like almost control of the entire company, which was crazy. And you know, it just really didn't make any sense. And it's also quite funny because there's just so many other avenues to go about starting a business or starting a company, or going about like your own self-education, or sure, they might have a particular system in place, but you know, that system came from somewhere else, you know. So I do like the idea of not necessarily just only with like movement practice, but even with you think of all these like self-help books that are kind of out there nowadays, where I do tend to find that a lot of them, you know, are based on a lot of relatively similar concepts. So then, you know, if you think about like maybe where did these concepts come from? So maybe a lot in the Western, let's say, you know, we're both kind of into Stoicism, right? And you think of, there's a lot of self-help books that are based off of like Stoic philosophy, or maybe another philosophy, or maybe it's based off of some old traditional Eastern philosophy, but just reworded into modern times, right? I do, though some people do have an amazing ability to kind of reword old texts so that maybe the younger generation can kind of better understand them, but I do find massive benefit in going back to the original texts as much as possible.
Yeah. You know, when I went to the texts for philosophy, I learned a lot of Hinduism within the Indian world, and then I also learned a lot of Buddhism. And one of my teachers from the Buddhist world compared the texts and then explained to me that physically, geographically, if you look at a map and you look at Asia and India, they're mirror opposites of each other. And so when you have countries that are close enough to each other and they're mirrors of each other, they're going to say exactly the opposite of each other, and they're both fundamentally true. So if India has all of these gods, Buddhism, there is no god. India, monkey mind, there is Buddhism, there is no mind. And so when we started putting those together, it was just like, they're just different understandings of truth. And we don't need to take everything, I don't need to take everything so literal anymore. But yeah, so I think going to the text is amazing for inspiration, but then also have your own experience of it. And also, for me, I try to be a little bit more panoramic.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, there's always going to be things that are for sure going to be situationally dependent, you know, and I think with regards to, and I guess the big thing that I really like about Stoicism is the general idea that it's mainly focused on like behaviors, right? And just basically understanding like that you have a choice in no matter what situation you're in, like how you respond to those situations. And though, you know, we may be put into like really shitty situations from time to time, you know, obstacles or challenges or whatever you might call them, but you know, you do have the ability within yourself to reframe the not the context,
The experience?
Oh my god.
The
story. There's another word I'm looking for. It starts with a C. I can't remember. This is one problem with that I've realized from teaching English as a second language in Korea for so long, is that it kind of like messed up my own like ability to speak English.
Oh, yeah. No, but while you're thinking of that, yeah, it's basically like emotion regulation.
Yeah.
And it's not like controlling the emotions. It's like feeling what you need to feel and residing in a space where there's choice between stimulus and response.
Yeah.
Versus stimulus and reaction. Did the C word come up yet?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it'll come up after the talk.
Yeah, that could be the description. It'll just be that one word.
Maybe. Possibly. So how are you enjoying your time in Bali?
I'm
You're
loving
here
it
for...
here. Yeah.
What are you mainly here for now?
I'm hosting a 10-day retreat. And
You do these every year?
May and September, apparently.
May and September,
yeah, I'm
okay.
very organic with it. So if one person asks me if I'm hosting a retreat in Bali anytime soon, I make a mental note. And then usually within a week or two or three other people have written to me. That's how the month-long in January started. I had a student stay after class asking me for recommendations in Bali. And he asked me if I do them. I was like, I would. If 3 to 5 people sign up, I would totally do it. And then within a week, I already had those people. So it kind of happens very organically. But currently, I'm here for a 10-day retreat in Ubud. And today was their day off. They went on a volcano trek, and I came here to train and be on the beach.
Have you done is it the Mount Batur trek?
That's the one they're doing. I did a goon. I think I did a goon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got altitude sickness.
Oh, really? Wait, how tall is that one?
I don't know, but I got really sick for like 3 days.
Oh, wow.
I was miserable.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'm here for a 10-day retreat, and I arrived a little bit earlier, and I'm leaving a little bit later.
Okay.
And I really like it here.
Well, would you be open to talking about your dietary changes recently?
Yeah.
So you were vegetarian, vegan for
12 years.
12 years. How much of that time was vegetarian, and how much of it
The
was...
majority of it was vegetarian.
Yeah.
And I went vegan probably in 2016. So the last 2 years, I would go vegetarian, vegan, vegetarian.
Okay.
But the first 10 years were vegetarian. And at the time, it kind of started naturally. I was hanging out with a lot of people who were Rasta, and they were vegetarian for decades, and it made it very natural. So that kind of happened, and then within the yoga world, there's this huge, within the Yoga Sutras, there's the yamas and the niyamas, which is the ways in which we live life.
Okay.
And the very first principle is ahimsa, nonviolence. And in some traditions, they go ahead and define nonviolence for you. In some traditions, it's just like non-harming to all sentient beings, animals included.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't harm an animal. And for me, it kind of made sense. If I won't kill it, I'm not going to eat it.
Right.
And so that, and then I did a teacher training that we had to be vegan in order to do it. And for the first few years, I wouldn't do it. And then gradually I said I was up for the challenge. I don't want one thing to stop me, especially if it's something I could do. So I tried it and it worked. I got really flexible really fast. My writing improved. I felt everything on a whole nother level. But on a mental level, I also was very judgmental and saw things as black and white. And it felt like, at times for me, I felt like I was better than other people because I was vegan or because I wasn't eating animal products. And fast forward, I went to India and I went to Bali, both, and I got very sick. And for 3 years, I had mystery illness. And I was always purging. I was in and out of hospitals. I had to have surgery. I had a lot of vertigo, migraines. My nails broke. Everything in my body was saying everything's off.
Wow.
Everything's off.
Yeah.
And it was mystery illness within the United States that said it was Crohn's disease. And I started going to different doctors. The main one that helped, we did elimination diet, and I was allergic to sugar, I was allergic to legumes, I was allergic to soy, I was allergic to most grains, nuts. I was allergic to being vegan.
Wow.
I'm like, I can't eat it. I'm like, what am I supposed to eat?
Yeah.
And the doctor was like, why don't you try eating salmon and avocado? And I remember crying about it all the time, but my vitals were so low that they were like, these vitals are usually seen right before someone has cancer, like within like liver dysfunction.
Wow.
And so I remember I cried so much when I had to eat this salmon. And when I did, almost immediately I felt like a fog lift out of my eyes. Like all of a sudden things were a little bit physically clearer. Like on a physical level, I felt like my skin, like I was getting a little bit healthier. And I stopped purging that same day. And mind you, I was purging about 13 times a day. It was like extreme.
Whoa.
It was extreme. I was hospitalized. Yeah. And that was for years, on and off. And so I ate salmon and it worked. And then another way to describe what was happening is I had dysentery, I had infection, I had a virus, I had parasites, I had worms, I had yeast, I had everything. And all of them feed off of sugar. That's the common denominator. And everything breaks down to sugar except meat and fat. So I started exploring more ketogenic.
Yeah.
And my body recovered so quickly. My nails don't break anymore as easily. My hair got curly again. My skin is soft. Physically, I'm way stronger. Mentally, I don't have a brain fog. I don't have migraines. So it was just that obvious, that fast. And so now I'm mostly animal protein, and I have no feelings about it. It took a while to get here. You know, I cried every day for months.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. One of my friends was, gave the comment that us as humans are one of the, if not maybe the only species that doesn't actually know like what we're supposed to be eating. There's just so many people that are just making all these kind of, they make their decisions based off of purely like like some kind of emotional response, and we see it a lot with people who like just finished watching a documentary on like, the farming industry and how they like slaughter all these cows, which I totally understand the idea that you want humane treatment of animals. But I do think that from a physiological point of view, like your body doesn't actually care about like your emotional feelings towards nutrition. It just knows that it needs a certain amount of nutrients from these particular foods, whatever they may be. So I think at the end of the day, like it seems odd that there's so many different ways of eating, whether it be like keto or vegetarian or carnivores and whatever, and that we're all kind of like, we all basically believe in that we should all be eating whole foods, and we shouldn't be eating all these like these products made by all these companies that come in bags and boxes and stuff, and we're all like fighting each other over like what's better, vegetarianism or veganism or whatever. And all these big companies are kind of just like, we're still going to make our vegan products to sell to vegans, and we're going to make our carnivore products to sell to carnivores. And when really, like, I think at least from a macro point of view, like I would think that we could all at least agree on that we obviously all need to eat whole foods as opposed to boxed goods, and we all need to stop with overconsumption generally, and that we all need to be behind like sustainable farming and regenerative agriculture. Of course there's going to be like the minute details, I suppose, for some people, like should you eat more meat or should you eat more carbs or whatnot, that people will argue over, but at least there should be some starting point to the conversation, instead of just saying like, oh, you're not a vegan, you're a horrible person.
I lost like 5,000 followers the minute I started talking about it.
A
lot of people were very upset and sending me videos of horrible treatment of animals. And I remember all along, I was like, if my grandfather was still alive, I don't think I would have ever gone vegetarian. He was the most peaceful human being I've ever in my life met, and he killed his own animals. Like, that's just kind of, it was just a given. It was, he raised them and he would kill them, and I didn't ever see him as an evil human being or any of that. But once he passed, I felt that I could do that. But yeah, no, I agree that in this society we're so distanced from ourselves that we need books to tell us how much to sleep, how much to eat, how much sex to have, what, like, as though we don't know our own bodies. But that's the thing with my body. It's helped me like go so specific, whether we're talking veganism or a particular style of yoga or whatever, and then either I get injured or I get mystery illness and I get detoured. I get rerouted. And it's just like, okay, that works, but not by itself. Not like that.
I think with nutrition as well, you know, like we're always going to be in this state of self-exploration to like what is most optimal. Now, there is some sense where maybe you don't necessarily want to be the most optimal, because doing so would require you to be so like on point with your nutrition that you like literally can't go out and have like a peaceful meal with your friends because you have to question the chef a million times for what's in the ingredients. But
I would do that. I would totally do that. I would just say, I'm going out, I'll meet up with my friends, I'm just not eating there. So I have no issue with that. And my budget for food is really high. I spend a lot of money on food. That most people are like, well, it must be expensive to eat the way you do. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I don't have an entertainment category. I don't spend a lot of money on concerts or bars or alcohol or clothes or makeup. I spend it on food and travel and training. Those are my three.
I think too, and if we come back to just a general idea of health, or how like so many people are willing to put so much money into like a bar tab, but not be willing to put in a quarter of that money to something that would actually help prolong their life.
And what happened was, when I was trying to not eat meat, I had a $10,000 surgery. You know, like there were like I had hospital bills from emergency rooms, and I was just like, wait, how much am I really just going to put myself through in order to hold on to this identity of being vegan or vegetarian or better than, or I refuse to eat meat, when direct experience showed me that. And I remember the first time I ate red meat for the first time in like 12 years. It was like this whole event. I dressed up, went to the waterfront, I went to the best place, and I was like, all right. And it was in my plate, and I was like, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do it. And I cut it, and when I ate it, I immediately smiled. I was like, this is so good. This is so good. I had been like, at no point did I consciously let go of meat, by the way. That was the other thing that happened. That's why it worked for me at first. When I first became vegetarian, I just didn't eat meat anymore. It wasn't an intellectual decision. It was just like, oh yeah, I haven't had meat in a while, have I? Whereas in order to eat meat, obviously, I had to make a conscious decision. But my body's responding really well, and I feel healthy and happy and supported.
Well, that's good. I mean, you definitely look very healthy. You look very strong, and I'm happy that it's amazing. Like having to, well, I mean, it's definitely unfortunate having to go through such a hard experience. But I think maybe looking at somewhat of the positive side of it is that they're kind of formative, right? Like you're now like. Ideally the amazing person you are now, partially because of that, I suppose.
Direct experience, and then just being like, wait, I get to choose what I do with myself versus having others' opinions of what I should do as a yogi or as a Ph.D. or as anything,
creating your own narrative, right, as opposed to having other people's being applied to you. Cool. Well, thank you so much for
this was awesome. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm very happy it worked out.
I'm sure we'll get to have some more conversations in the future. Enjoy the rest of your time in Bali. So Marie, where can everybody find you?
My Marie Belle PR. It's my name. So MarieBelle PR. Instagram.com, Gmail, Facebook.
Instagram.com? What?
No, any of them. MarieBellePR.com.
.com, okay.
Marie Belle PR Instagram, Marie Belle PR Facebook. And if that's challenging, it could be rootsloveyoga.com.
Rootsloveyoga.com.
Roots Love Yoga is my school, and it will take you to my page as well.
Okay. How'd you come up with that name?
I just love it. I'm roots. I've always liked roots, like roots reggae, roots in India. I'm very, very interested in the roots of things and where they're coming from and what nourishes it. So I
Oh.
like it. Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanted something that was easy to remember and it kind of flows well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a nice, all-inclusive reasoning for using the word roots, I suppose. Like, as opposed to just being like, I love chocolate, and I don't know. Okay, but cool. We'll also include all of that information into the onto the page with the podcast, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again for joining the Practitioners Panel podcast. Thank you, Marie, for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for
It's
having me.
great to have you.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, everybody.